Welcome to this virtual ground driving clinic. My name is Nate Eicher. We are here in Montana at Lisa Merrick's place, and she's allowing me to use this young horse they call Mitch. When I start a young horse in ground driving, I feel like it's really important to teach this aspect of it before I start riding a young horse. And also, like a yearling, you can't ride them for another year or two, depending on when you like to start your program and how mature they are. So ground driving is just a great way to teach them mentally and to also help them build up some muscles physically. So Lisa's done a great job with this young horse up till now. She's got him really quiet. So that makes a big difference. You know, I want my horses pretty quiet when I start ground driving. You know, so there's a lot of groundwork leading up to the ground driving portion of it. There's a couple things my horses need to know before I start ground driving. And that is, you know, the number one thing is they have to be quiet enough to where they're not real flighty anymore. Otherwise, they're just gonna kind of run off with you when you start putting the lines on them. Then I like to make sure they know how to carry a surcingle or a saddle. A surcingle is great because you have your rings to put your ground driving lines through. You can also use a saddle and put it through the stirrups. I don't prefer that quite as much because of how low it is. So on my saddles at home, I actually have rings put on the front of them for the ground driving purposes. And the reason for that is when I'm going to ground drive, when I'm pulling on the reins back here to steer them, it's pulling more from this angle and not pulling their head down. I don't want their head dropping lower, their neck dropping lower as I'm working with them, because it tends to make them drop their shoulders and walk more on the front end. And I want their shoulders real freed up left and right. So that's the reasoning behind that. So the other thing is, when I'm getting ready to ground drive, I want to test my horse as far as making sure they're good with a rope behind their hindquarters. And so what I'll do here is just test this. I'm holding here so I have leverage on the face in case he would spook about this, but I'm just going to rub this rope. I'll turn him so you can see it a little better. And I believe Lisa's done a lot of this, but I never take it for granted. I never assume that they're gonna be good. So I'm gonna work this rope down. I'm standing in a safe position in case it would kick. And I'm just gonna lightly rub it back and forth here, because when you are ground driving, that rope is going around their hindquarters. So you have to be prepared. Otherwise, you're in for a wreck with the ground driving lines. So that seems to be pretty good. I might walk him forward with it yet. And I'm just tugging on those hindquarters just to see what kind of reaction is there. And he's pretty good with that. Then the next thing I'll do is I like to make sure they can steer left and right a little bit off of a lead rope. So if I tug on the right side, which I do it, you know, I'll flex them a little bit on each side first, but then I'll go ahead and just gently tug this line here and see if he can follow that lead line with his nose and then with his shoulders, because that's essentially what we're doing when we're ground driving, is we're getting them to follow their nose around here. So I'm pulling very lightly here, and there, that right front stepped over. That's what I'm after. Great job. This is a good-minded young horse. Takes to learning very well, making my job easier. But he is still a young horse, and we no matter how quiet they are, we always have to be careful as we work around them. So I'm going to do the same thing on the left side. I'm just going to gently get it started and let him take his time as he's trying to figure this out. So he's pretty comfortable with it, so I'm going to tug just a little more and encourage him to step to the left. And as I'm doing this, I'm staying far enough behind that I don't get kicked. I don't think he would kick, but you always have to be aware and careful no matter how quiet they are. Then the last thing I like to make sure of before I get to ground driving is see if there's any understanding as far as going forward, because we are driving them from behind. So if your horse has no sense of knowing how to go forward on a cluck or a tap, then it makes our job really hard as well. So putting all these little steps in the process before we actually get to ground driving is setting them up for success when we actually put the lines on them. So I'm going to come at a 45-degree angle here where I'm just almost behind him a little bit, and I might cluck, and then it's very similar to lunging. It's just a little bit of a different angle. It's pretty good that way. I'm just going to tug him over here and then try it from this side. So I'll rub him with this crop here, and then I'm also setting him up to see if I can come back on both sides and him be fine with that. Some horses, you're going to have to work a good while to get them comfortable with you being behind them. So you got to work at it from both sides at a safe place, And now we're going to go ahead and cluck, and then I'll just start putting a little bit of energy into my hands and my crop. There we go, and release as soon as he moves. All right, so those were good tests. He passed all of them. So we're going to go ahead and get ready to put the lines on him.